What's the number one challenge for businesses today?
Workforce development, attracting, recruiting, and retaining people.
And that's why we created this podcast, designed for the frustrated CEO, the under-resourced recruiter, or the overworked manager, to give you the tools to tackle those WTF moments.
It's time to open another Workforce Therapy file.
Welcome back to the Workforce Therapy Files. So I believe that this episode airs very close to the inauguration.
Yes, I believe you're right. Episode 18.
And Molly, one of the things that we were talking about is how organizations really have to give some thought and intention behind navigating uncertainty.
Yes.
And with
it isn't easy for anybody.
That's right. And with every presidential change, one of the things we know for certain is that there, especially when we go from Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican, is that how work works changes.
That's right.
That's right. And for someone who's been in HR for the millions of years collectively that we've been in HR, we have seen this happen, right? We've
multiple
seen
times
policy changes that
That's right.
people feel very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm grateful that the messengers haven't been shot over some of the things we've shared that we now have to do. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I was thinking about if we were to give tips about how to navigate this, and I came up with a story that I wanted to tell you.
I can't wait. I
Okay.
love stories.
All right. So one of my absolute favorite podcasts is a podcast called Fixable, besides the Workforce Therapy Files. for what
That's
it's
number
worth.
one.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
But the second one's called Fixable. Okay. Dr. Frances Fry, who is a Harvard Business School professor, is one of the co-hosts. And she and her partner basically go through and look at business challenges. And then they give this really cool formula for how to fix those business challenges. So I'm just gonna summarize it here because I think it goes with the other things that we can talk about here.
Okay.
They basically said that whenever trust is desired, and I think we can both agree that trust is key whenever you're dealing with uncertainty, that there's three things that you should look for. You should look for whether or not you are authentic, empathetic, and are basing your decisions on rigorous logic.
Say that one more time.
Authentic, empathetic, and it's based on rigorous logic. So you can trust me if you feel like you're getting the real me, that I'm in it for you, and I care about you, and that I'm giving you information that is based in rigorous logic.
Even if we disagree.
Even if we disagree.
That's right.
Because then we can at least have a conversation about what we
yes.
disagree on.
Exactly.
Right? Absolutely.
With facts.
With facts.
Not opinions, not what I'm being shown,
Yeah.
not the facts that I'm being given. This is my research.
Absolutely. And I'm not doing it based off of how algorithms want me to think, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And what's this called again?
It is, the podcast is called Fixable.
Okay.
And I highly recommend listening to this one particular episode because I really like that formula, right? It's authenticity, empathy, and rigorous logic. So when I think about navigating uncertainty, I want to take this concept and start to apply it. For my team, I've also been asking us to look at our communications, look at our plans. Do we feel like we've got all three of those things checked off?
I love that.
Yeah.
Being able to run all of that through that filter, that lens, to check yourself.
To check yourself. Yeah.
Because, when we're going through situations where we don't even know, like let's say the company's getting bought and there's going to be a transition. That's definitely navigating through uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Right? So even if we take that mindset from a business perspective of where we're headed right now, this year, where we are in this phase, in this season of life, we are navigating uncertainty just as we would in any other scenario. It's just bigger.
Yeah. And I think one of the cool things about that formula is it can even help you give yourself a check
Yes.
about what part of this do I feel most uncomfortable with. Is it because I don't believe I'm hearing the truth? So I don't believe it's authentic? Do I believe that it doesn't demonstrate the impact that it's going to have on me? Or is it that I don't believe in the logic? I feel like there's this entire chunk of information that's missing.
Well, and as HR professionals, whether it be HR, recruiting, workforce alignment, whatever your position is within an organization, as you're navigating through any uncertainty, you have to be able to remove self to a point that allows for diversity of thinking.
Absolutely.
I think the word diversity is used in a sense of where we mentally go from a visual perspective, and it there's so much more. It's so much deeper, and you have to be open-minded to see others' points of view with facts to come up with the right plan for all.
Yes.
And in HR, we don't have the pleasure of having an opinion from that sense.
And I know that through our podcast experience, you've heard me share with you some of these nuggets I've collected over the years from trainings or experiences. And as much as we want to drive from facts, there's not a single fact we can give anybody that automatically changes the way they feel.
Right.
Sometimes it's built on filters and experiences and past trauma and things like that. And all of this goes into how do we navigate uncertainty.
Right. And I think I like your trust triangle.
Yeah.
I love that. And using that as the one of the things we just went through strategic planning a few months back. And one of the things that we did was, okay, these are the goals. Every conversation we were having about digging deep into certain things, getting into the weeds on things. Okay, great. But does that fall in line with these 3 goals that we've set for ourselves?
Absolutely.
So
That's right.
keeping that steadfast all the time. This is great. This is where we want to go. These are the things we want to do. But does this need to fall sidebar until this is solved?
Yeah.
And maintaining that focus for the organization, for the leaders, to constantly turn around and say, yeah, but are we doing what we said we were going to do?
Yes.
And thinking about the uncertainty of the workforce today, I think 2025 is really going to lead the way for a few different things. And on top of all of the uncertainty that we're feeling from a political stance right now, but the impact of what that uncertainty is going to do to the workforce is huge.
Absolutely.
Driving change, understanding the needs of now what will be 6 generations in the workplace. Are we there yet? I know we're at 5.
It's getting really close.
So
I don't know when that next one pops up.
yeah, I want to say that it's pretty close. And when we think about the trends for 2025, the proactive mindset that leaders have to take because of the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Not just from a political stance, but the ripple effect of what that situation is going to drive for us. So when we think about planning for strategy and what 25 is going to do, we have to be mindful of that.
And one of the things you said that I don't even know that you realized I was going to hone in on this, but you mentioned goals for your organization.
Yeah.
So that strategic planning activity is 1,000% key. And it's twice as important in periods of uncertainty.
Yes.
Right? Because you have to keep a laser focus on what's important so that when things happen, those distractions, because that's what they'll be, is a distraction from those goals whenever things start to change or shift, right?
Right.
So in your strategic planning, what are some things that you guys do to translate goals to who you need to do those goals? How do you translate
the
that
action of it?
Yes.
So one of the things that we try to do is, the typical SWOT, right? Can any of us say that 5 years ago that a threat in our SWOT was a pandemic?
For those who don't use SWOT, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Threats, right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. One of the things that I've always wanted to do in the 10 years of Incipio is to make sure that we can always drive back to one of those 3 goals. And setting those can be high level, that 30,000 foot, because each goal is going to represent a different success story depending upon where you are within the organization. But everyone has to have a bit of that to achieve that success in the goal. And I think not just with the political uncertainty, but I think it's also about where we are as a whole, as a community, when we're thinking of our organization that we're in, and just overall as humans, and the lack of commitment has to be brought to light.
Say more.
We're in a situation where I feel like it's okay to flip-flop multiple times. Mm-hmm. So you made a point of, I will listen to you if I trust you. Mm-hmm. I will listen to you if not only you're telling me your opinion, but you're backing up the facts that support your opinion.
Or at least just the facts as I know them, right? And that's the cool thing about the podcast. It gives you tips for how to do that.
Yeah.
So that you don't lose trust for the things you don't know.
Right. And I think that that's a lost art.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And heading into the year and really looking at how we do better. We have to do better.
Yeah.
Because the workforce is not going to allow us to continue to suck.
Everybody's making some choices every day, aren't they? Absolutely.
And no matter the position that you're in, the situation of belief, it's changing. Mm-hmm. And when I think about going through just a regular work day and all of the things that we have to manage and balance, we talked about in our last episode with Tiffany, the mental health aspect. It's so poor for everyone. No matter how strong we try to be, where we all are personally, professionally, the driving of change that we're all trying to make better, or we hope that we're all trying to make better, it's such a balance of, there are a few times a year that I really try to unplug as a person, as a human, to allow myself that grace. But then the guilt that comes from it, leading up to it, I mean, it's almost like it takes a couple of days to release myself from that. Mm-hmm. And that's not fair. We have to be able to disconnect to reconnect. We talked in the last episode about slowing down to speed up. One of the things we have to do is stop being so reactive. Mm-hmm. Because that's not solving anyone's problems, and there's another Band-Aid.
And when you add layers of uncertainty, mm-hmm. it makes everything worse.
Everything.
Right?
There's no balance. There's no flexibility. There's no need that's being addressed. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I got a little tangent there.
No, I love it. I like it whenever you take me on journeys, Molly.
Say more. Use more words.
Say more. Well, and one of the things I'd like to highlight is we don't know what's coming, so that we are absolutely living in another period of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And the types of things that people anticipate happening will have a really strong impact on how businesses lead their workforce. So there are a couple of things that we know will be at least talking points. Mm-hmm. Things like immigration and the gaps that could exist if our approach to visas change. We know that minimum wage. Now, I don't feel like most companies anymore are using minimum wage as their guidepost, because you wouldn't have as many people working for your organization.
What is it? Is it $7?
Like $7.25 or something like that?
Yeah, the federal minimum wage, but then you have the social minimum wage too, and that's a whole nother. Yeah,
absolutely. And so this one doesn't concern me as much about minimum wage potentially going away. We'll see what happens there. There's always a lot of discussion about how to classify workers and whether or not you can use contractors and how contractors look. There was a whole push from the DOL last year to redefine how those individuals were classified. There's a lot of discussion across states right now because of labor shortages about changing child labor requirements. And I got to tell you, the idea of either of my kids driving a forklift sounds terrifying because they're both under the age of 15. But who knows what the future of child labor looks like. And so one of the biggest things that I can share with you is paying really close attention and having somebody on your team that has the responsibility for paying attention to the actual government websites and
I'm sorry, what was that word that you said again? Just one more time. More time.
Actual government websites. Because there are a lot of opinions out there. Wait, I have my own, but we're trying really hard not to do those today.
Right. Is TikTok considered an actual government website?
It's not. It's not. Dang. As much as I'd like to think that everything I'm getting from TikTok is 100% fact-checked, we know that's not true.
That's right.
My best friend, by the way, who is a longtime listener to the Workforce Therapy Files,
Good
really
job, best
laughs.
friend.
Yes, really laughs at the number of times that I refer to TikTok, though, in my conversations and say I've read an article that said, it usually means I saw TikTok. Which is why I think it's really important to make sure someone on your team is really reviewing the government website. So pay attention to the Department of Labor website, because that's where updates to a number of these items will be posted. That's how we get our communication. Your state Department of Labor websites are reliable places to understand what your requirements are. If you find a place where you feel fuzzy, then reach out. Find someone that you trust that is knowledgeable. It can either be your employment attorney or your preferred HR consultant at Parcel, or somebody that you trust.
Right.
But using the government websites for guidance is going to be key. And one of the things that we shared last season that I think helps with your strategic planning, your workforce planning, is also using the DOL website to look at labor statistics. And if those seem like you're reading way too much data, we provided some really neat tips in the last season, specifically File 6, about how to read the reports on labor statistics.
Well, and when we talk about navigating through uncertainty, workforce, managing humans, and just all of the things of what that means, we have to go at this in a completely different approach than we have in the past. And here's what I mean. I'm using more words.
I like them.
We have to think of the different ways that people are going to come to us and solve for that. Here's what I mean. If I have someone that comes to me and says, I'm in a situation personally and I need more flexibility in my work, I need to be remote 2 or 3 days a week to be able to support my family. I know that my role, I need to be here from a team perspective. We're not building anything. It's not my hands that are part of a team. It's my mind that's a part of the team. Then why wouldn't we? You know, the whole, what are they calling, what's the acronym? RTO, return to work, return to office. I hear you. I get it. I believe that camaraderie happens naturally as opposed to being forced. You know, when you feel like you have to do that, there's not a lot of free-flowing ideas that happen.
I don't know. I kind of like free throwing.
Do you?
Yeah,
free
I thought
throwing
that was good.
like a ball, not spaghetti, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I get that you have to have that balance, but you also have to hear people where they are. And if you think about the last 4 or 5 years of the workforce, we've been more engaged in each other's lives outside of work than ever before. I can tell you what the inside of people's homes look like, not because I've been there.
What their kids look like.
Right.
How
They have
crazy
a
their dog is.
Right?
Right.
And that's a whole fine line that we never had before. So to say that we're navigating through uncertainty, we have to balance what that means.
Yeah.
Because we've been more personal than we ever have before.
And I think if we were to look back at what inspired so many of the things that you're talking about, COVID was a big era for that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that companies did that I think set up a really nice blueprint for how to navigate uncertainty. One is making sure that you remain educated. I don't know the number of times that I checked the CDC websites.
Where are we today?
The
What is
government
rule?
mandates.
Yeah.
We had multiple states that we were supporting at the time, and going to each state website to make sure that we were staying relevant and current.
Yes.
Right?
With facts.
That's right. We regularly checked in with our people to understand what was going well and what wasn't, right? So that we could
Yes.
make sure that the plans that we put together, confirming that those plans were able to be executed, that they were well supported, that they had the right blocking and tackling. You know,
And you explained it in English.
absolutely.
Why things were happening.
We changed our benefits around so that they matched what people needed because everything was different, and we wanted to
Right.
make sure that our sick time covered things like having to be quarantined, right?
Right.
Like those kinds of things. So we made adjustments based on the changing landscape. And for me, that's the key. Is it's making sure we're paying attention to that trust triangle and then gut checking ourselves about whether or not the things that we're doing. I can't tell you something that frustrates me more than people saying, well, this is our policy. This is our policy. So
That's about like saying, well, this is the way we've always done it.
I feel like I just triggered Molly. Like, you guys didn't get to see her face, but her eyes got really big and she was really passionate.
I cannot stand that.
That's right. Absolutely.
The only way that we're going to be able to navigate uncertainty with what I would consider certainty is to listen for it.
That's right. And see whether or not it's working.
Right. And catch and release. That's okay.
And accept that you have no idea what is happening, what's coming next. You don't know what's going to get thrown into the mix. And that is probably the other giant lesson from COVID, was everything kept changing. I mean, in terms of what the CDC was suggesting and how we were supposed to proceed with this. So the number of tweaks and adjustments that were made along the way, like daily wellness checks, that was like, who's going to do that? We don't know who's going to do that.
And why is it important? And one of the greatest things that I think that we can do better is just communicate, even if it's that we don't know.
Because it's authentic.
Right. And
You see how we keep going back to that, though.
right. And saying that out loud to people, I don't know right now. I can tell you that we're working on it.
I can tell you the things we're considering, the
Right.
stuff that we're paying attention to,
Exactly.
the options we've thought through and decided not to do.
And how? How might we?
That's right.
And what do you suggest? Where's your headspace?
Yeah.
Because you have to keep that door open for fluid conversation. Just like we said earlier, even if we don't agree, we have to understand why. And there's so many times that we're left with no information. So we build the story in our mind. And I don't know about you, Jamie, but is your imagination pretty powerful?
Yeah. Some would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yes.
I know we don't, like when we were kids and having imaginary situations or imaginary friends or whatever that is. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the imagination where someone gives you a sentence and you write an entire novel.
Well, so here's the thing about me, Molly. I legitimately believe in my heart of hearts that I am a strong dot connector. Like, I see things happening and I'm like, oh, wait, this must mean that this is happening, and that must mean that that is happening, and that must mean that that is happening. And collectively, it looks like this. And sometimes I nail it. There are other times I don't nail it.
Would you give that a percentage? Are you 70-30?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty reliable at this point.
Really?
I feel like, well, you have to keep in mind, I've built a career around reading people.
Yeah, you had
right?
to.
So for 25 years, I've been trying to understand what makes people tick and
So you have an
what they look
advantage.
like when they're telling the truth. And
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, you're, for those people who do investigations, they're looking up and to the left, or they're looking up and to the right. I don't even know whether or not there's 100% basis there, but it allows you a cue to go and look at something else.
Yeah.
Ask a different question.
Different way.
Yes.
Presented a different way.
I still leave the possibility that I don't know whether or not these dots are connected, but I do use those to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And
And I think that you have to. Because a gut check, an emotion, a thought, a solution to a problem that's not there yet to be solved, you have to check yourself.
So let's summarize then for our listeners
Okay.
our top recommendations for navigating uncertainty.
Yeah, we've been across the board, haven't we?
We have. So let's summarize to bring everybody back, because people love our stories. I know it. That's why they're still listening. So we started with the trust triangle.
Right.
And I'm going to repeat real quick. Are you being authentic, empathetic, and do you have rigorous logic? All of those, by the way, can be gut checked with a trusted partner.
Right.
Number 2, are you doing strategic planning? Are you considering your company's goals? Are you taking that and applying it to what your customers need, what your work needs, the skills that you need, and therefore the roles that you need, and what gaps exist so that you can create meaningful plans?
And always going back to them.
Absolutely.
Even in October.
Yes, even in October.
Yeah.
Did we do the stuff that we said that we were going to?
Exactly.
Balance employee needs and business needs. So you've heard in our last episode, we talked about mental health. We've mentioned on this one flexibility. and overall really paying attention to your employee experience, right? We talked about some of the potential anticipated challenges, and the best way to navigate that is making sure you're using a trusted resource. Our recommendation is to use government websites to really understand what the act is, what the requirements are, what your timelines are, and become more familiar with using the tools that are available on those government websites like labor statistics.
Which again was in file 6
File
of,
6.
of season 1 that we talked about, and really deep dive into those numbers and how to read that report
Yes.
and what it really means. And there will never be data that is real today. It's always in looking back. So when you anticipate navigating uncertainty, you have to take what the history has been, not just in the last couple of years, but the last 5 to 7, because you've got so many variables that come into play over what's happened in the world the last 5 to 7 years, and taking that into account and going back to your goals of how all of these things take place into your workplace and what you need to do to drive the change.
I think that's a great summary, Molly.
Thanks. You did well
Absolutely.
as well.
Thanks.
I'm loving that trust triangle. Good job.
Who
was it again?
Favorites. Okay, so the podcast is Fixable with
Fixable.
Dr. Francis Fry.
Okay.
I definitely want to make sure I give appropriate attribution because that podcast is also an incredible podcast. You should listen to it if you had more than 30 minutes available, because the first 30 is for us, right? That's
Yeah.
for the Workforce Therapy Files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So a good 60 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right.
Well, I think as we're kicking off 2025, I think even without the political changes that we're experiencing, I think it's just going to be a different year altogether. So keeping steadfast on your goals and who you are as a human and managing to those expectations, you have to keep that level of integrity across the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Jamie.
Jim, let's close that file. Thanks for listening to the Workforce Therapy Files. We hope you learned something new, and we're thankful for the time that you spent with us today. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, reach out to us. Our contact information is listed in the show notes. Until next time, keep your head up.